presenting my PCT project on the association between physical activity, sleep, and quality of life in patients in remission from Cushing Syndrome. So Cushing Syndrome is an excessive production of the stress hormone cortisol over a long period of time. Over 70% of Cushing Syndrome cases are marked by Cushing's disease, which is characteristic of an adrenal or pituitary tumor. The incidence rate is 0.7 to 2.4 million cases per year, so it's pretty rare. And the prevalence, more females than males have it, it's about a 3-to-1 ratio. Most patients experience remission about 3 years after treatment. However, very few reach normal cortisol secretion after longer follow-up periods. So some symptoms of Cushing syndrome are characteristic of other diseases and may be misdiagnosed for years before being properly diagnosed and treated. As you can see, here are some of the physical symptoms of Cushing syndrome, and I wanted to note that visceral obesity has occurred in 96% of this population of 302 patients. Visceral obesity is just the fat deposits that come around the midsection. So I'm going to be bringing that up a little later, so I wanted to kind of clarify what that was. There are also a lot of psychological symptoms that are associated with Cushing syndrome. One of the main ones is fatigue and decreased energy. So in this sample of 32 patients, almost 100% of patients either have some sort of fatigue or decreased energy. Also, over 80% of this population has some sort of impaired memory, and over 50% of this population has some sort of insomnia. So compared to age and gender matched controls, patients in remission from Cushing syndrome experience impaired quality of life after remission. So one of the reasons is because of the maintenance of visceral obesity. So after cortisol levels return to normal, it's not like the visceral obesity just disappears. So that perpetuates features of metabolic syndrome in these patients, including impaired glucose tolerance and hypertension. And it also heightens the risk for cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So sleep disturbances have been observed in patients in remission from Cushing syndrome. And sleep disturbances have been shown to negatively impact quality of life in populations without Cushing syndrome, but this association has never been explored in patients in remission from Cushing syndrome. So moderate intensity physical activity performed 3 times a week has been shown to decrease visceral obesity, improve sleep quality, and improve quality of life in non-Cushing's populations. Therefore, engaging in physical activity after remission may improve patients in remission from Cushing syndrome, although this has never been explored either. So for my study, we expected to find significant differences between poor and good sleep quality, and also between sufficient and insufficient physical activity levels. We also expected to find that sleep quality and physical activities would both be associated with quality of life. And finally, that sleep quality would be associated with physical activity. So the first measure we used was the Cushing Quality of Life Questionnaire, which measures disease-specific health-related quality of life. And it has 2 different subscales, the psychosocial issue subscale and the physical problem subscale. Now, the physical problem subscale does have one question pertaining to sleep quality, which we removed to avoid issues with collinearity. So the questions on the Cushing Quality of Life reflect 3 different dimensions of quality of life: physical aspects, psychological aspects, and also social aspects. Second measure we used was the Godin Shepherd Leisure Time Physical Activity Questionnaire, and that measures physical activity levels. First of all, it measures the frequency of activity bouts per week, so how often are they engaging in physical activity, and it also measures the intensity of physical activity, so whether they're engaging in strenuous, moderate, or light physical activity. And as you can see, I listed some of the activities that are listed on the questionnaire that kind of let participants know what would be considered a strenuous, moderate, or light physical activity. From that, we can derive a leisure time score index classification, which differentiates insufficient from insufficient physical activity levels. And the third measure was the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, which differentiates poor from good sleep quality. There's 7 different subscales that it looks at, and from that we can derive a global sleep quality score, which ranges from 0 to 21. Right. So previous research has shown that participants who are female, older, less educated, and overweight tend to be less accurate in their recall of physical activity when compared to male, younger, normal weight participants. So we went ahead and controlled for age, gender, education, and BMI. Also, previous research has shown that patients who have been in remission for longer periods of time have better quality of life than those who have been in remission for a shorter time period. Therefore, we went ahead and controlled for time in remission. Finally, patients who have undergone postoperative radiotherapy have been shown to experience a worse quality of life than those who do not undergo postoperative radiotherapy. So we went ahead and controlled for postoperative radiotherapy as well. So we partnered with the Cushing Support and Research Foundation to gather these data. And the online questionnaire was open from January 2018 through March of 2018. So here are the demographics from the sample. We had 7 male participants and 140 female participants. The mean age was about 50 years old. And as you can see, over 90% of our sample had said that they were of white ethnicity, had a bachelor's degree, and over half had indicated that they were either in the overweight or obese category.
Use the space bar.
Maybe it's that.
Yeah, because they're going to the same input.
All right, so here are the regression results for the Cushing quality of life on the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, the Leisure Time Score Index, and on the covariance. So as you can see, the Cushing quality of life, the psychosocial issues subscale, was not significantly associated with the Leisure Time Score Index. However, it was negatively associated with the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, suggesting that the higher the quality of life, the lower the score on the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. Just to note, the lower the score means better sleep. Okay. Also, in this, years in remission was significantly associated, suggesting that the more years in remission, the higher the quality of life on this subscale. BMI was significantly associated, suggesting that the higher the BMI, the lower the quality of life on this subscale. You can also see, so the second subscale was the physical problem subscale. And again, the Leisure Time Score Index was not significantly associated. However, there's another negative association on the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, again suggesting that the higher the quality of life in this domain, the lower the sleep quality index would be. Gender was also significantly associated. However, we only had a sample of 7 males, so it's probably not necessarily interpretable. Postoperative radiotherapy was also significantly associated, suggesting that the higher the quality of life, or suggesting that people who had actually had postoperative radiotherapy had a worse quality of life. And again, BMI was significantly associated, so suggesting that the higher the BMI, the lower the quality of life on the physical problem subscale. So from this study, we find that sleep quality is a significant factor when looking at quality of life in patients in remission from Cushing syndrome. However, physical activity was not significantly associated as initially predicted. Findings suggest that 40.8% of the sample of patients in remission from Cushing syndrome engage in sufficient physical activity levels, which is really, really high. So the Center for Disease Control estimates that only 1 in 5 adult Americans engage in sufficient physical activity levels, which is 21%. So we were thinking that there may be a possible bias present in this study. So it could be the fact that we have, older female overweight participants. Previous research has shown that, they don't necessarily report, they're not necessarily accurate in their report of physical activity. So it could be that. Also, it could be a self-selection bias. So we did advertise this as a lifestyle study. So people who engaged in healthier lifestyles would maybe more inclined to participate in this study specifically. This sample or Cushing syndrome patients have cognitive impairment. So they may just not be able to recall their level of physical activity levels as well as other populations may be able to. All right, so some limitations. These are all self-report measures. And also this is limited to a sample of Cushing Support and Research Foundation members. Now, although this is a convenient sample, The Cushing Support and Research Foundation is nationally representative. So it's a national foundation. So this is technically a nationally representative population.